Today on StoryCube, we're welcoming a woman whose job scares everyone, and yet, without her, no farewell would be possible. Sabrina is an Undertaker. She washes, dresses, and makes up the dead, but mostly handles the living, since her job is more about unusual situations than death itself. Families trade insults by the coffin, make odd requests, reveal secrets, cause drama, and even share unforgettable laughter. She's been asked to dress a deceased person in awful costumes and put adult toys in a coffin. She has witnessed fights at ceremonies, and even a giant conga line emerge from a crematorium. Behind these surreal moments lies the true weight of death. Unrecognizable bodies, shattered families, stories she's witnessed firsthand. What's the hardest thing she's prepared? The wildest scene? The secrets you discover when you take care of the dead. Tonight in StoryCube, Sabrina takes us behind the scenes of a taboo profession. She shares memories of preparing the dead, unforgettable families, and remarkable stories from her time as an Undertaker. The episode is cold, absurd, sometimes shocking, yet deeply human. Welcome to StoryCube.
We occasionally get unusual requests, like when an elderly woman wanted to be sent off with all her sex toys. So we put all the sex toys in the coffin.
It's about defending her, yes.
We handled them with gloves, of course. I've already been asked for some rather unusual clothes, like, for example, Hitler's costume. I've already been asked for the defendant to leave wearing Hitler's costume, which I refused, because it's not legal.
That's because they're fanatical about it.
There was a murder, the person was shot twice in the head, and on the day of the ceremony, even days before the ceremony, the family received threats since the suspected murderer hadn't been found.
And they thought it was someone from the opposing family? What?
No, not necessarily. No. Actually, the police couldn't find who committed the murder, but the murderer was still out there, clearly.
Hello everyone. Today on StoryCube, we're welcoming Sabrina. She actually has a rather unusual job. She's an Undertaker, or rather, a funeral advisor. Her job is packed with wild stories, each crazier than the last. Today, we're lucky to have her on StoryCube to share what her job is like and the craziest things she's experienced. Sabrina, welcome to StoryCube. Nice to meet you. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Nice to meet you.
Maybe before we get into the heart of the matter, can you tell me a bit about what you do? What is this job of being an Undertaker? Everyone knows the term a little, but we don't really know what it actually is.
Actually, croquet-mort is jargon, but we usually say funeral advisor or ceremony master. What's unique about me is I'm also the manager of a funeral home.
So, what does that actually involve?
Actually, it involves supporting families who are going through grief from A to Z. That means organizing the ceremony, creating the ceremony, handling all the procedures, funerals, administrative tasks, and so on. Connecting with nursing homes and various places of worship. It's also about supporting them through the ceremony, including the burial, cremation, and officiating.
What about you? Maybe people are wondering, but what made you get into this line of work? In the end, it's quite unusual.
We don't usually grow up wanting to be undertakers. It's not necessarily a job people think of as a calling, and yet it became a calling for me.
What fascinated you about it?
If you want, I spent 11 years in the hotel and restaurant industry unrelated to this. And then I experienced grief very closely, so I lost my father, who was 52 years old, who passed away from cancer. That was 6 years ago. And actually, it was extremely eye-opening for me. I thought to myself, wow, he worked hard his whole life only to end up like that. He ruined his health without enjoying life, without being able to do so many things. And I thought, no, but actually, are you really happy? And I had everything to be happy, but professionally speaking, I wasn't. So I realized the importance of organizing funerals too, because I had to organize my father's. And I thought, there's a real profession behind it. I visited a funeral home for a reason other than planning a funeral and fell in love with the profession. I haven't looked back since.
What was it that fascinated you about it?
It's the feeling of being useful, of supporting people during the worst moments of their lives and helping them, guiding them. We experience incredible sensations. We go through emotions that are just completely overwhelming. We don't realize that our job is so all-encompassing, that it actually involves so much. We experience and feel far more than we realize, and I really loved that.
Have you had families request to place valuable or unusual items in the coffin during preparation?
Well, precious things. Usually jewelry and things like that, the families tend to keep them, but yes, there have been some slightly quirky things.
It's funny, so usually families still keep the jewelry. They don't necessarily prefer to leave the...
Often they like to keep them, they like to keep them, maybe thinking that it will go into the inheritance. For example, grandma's ring, which is important for the granddaughter's engagement or something else, so they also like to keep the jewelry as a memento. Sometimes we add unusual things, but we also include more traditional items like photos and flowers.
What is it? The most classic things in general?
We mostly put photos, flowers, letters, and drawings. We sometimes get odd requests, like when a grandma asked to be buried with her sex toys, so we placed them in her coffin.
But from the deceased?
Yes, we handled them with gloves, of course. It was crazy. And when she was alive, she was totally fine with it. She told me so. We arranged a funeral, but she clearly wanted to take all her sex toys with her.
Does that mean it's stated in the contract that there's the presence of... How do you respond to that?
Actually, I had her repeat 2 or 3 times that she had asked me that, and I thought, is this a joke? Honestly, it was really strange. And then the way she was about 70, between 70 and 75, I don't remember exactly. But no, she was totally open about it, telling me, actually, I've lacked love my whole life. Men just aren't capable. She was just too much. Yes, it's in that.
So what is it? Is it about lasting longer or showing that female pleasure matters more in the end?
It was important for her in this case, and for many women as well. For her, it's been with her most of her life, though maybe not from the very start, since I'm not sure it existed then. Yes, it was different, but in recent years the sex toys really helped and supported her. That's why she clearly wanted to leave with them.
That's crazy. And are there other objects, you know, strange like that, that you might have seen in coffins, or things where you think, oh, that's funny, I'm not used to that, you know?
Yeah, well, alcohol bottles. Usually there are people who try to put alcohol bottles in. Well, it's not legal, so I have to take them out and tell them, you'll drink it later.
You can't put an alcohol bottle in a...
It depends. The issue is it pollutes heavily, and if an alcohol bottle is present during cremation...
Ah, yes, okay.
It's not compatible, right? Exactly, we can't include certain items for cremation, like mints. Things with batteries, alcohol, or anything flammable are avoided because they ignite in the oven.
Why do people put alcohol bottles in there?
Maybe the deceased was someone who enjoyed life and liked living well. They had lots of drinks together, they went to festivals and things like that, so it stays as a memory. Also, in the Southwest, you'll see a lot of things like that because we have quite a rugby culture with third halves and all that. People often ask me for things like that, or even to have a drink after the funeral.
Okay, yeah. What are the strangest things you've been asked? I don't know, like writing something, for example, or slipping something in to go with the deceased. Are there things people ask you, things like that?
I've already been asked for unusual clothing, like a Hitler costume. Yeah, I've already been asked for the deceased to leave wearing a Hitler costume, which I refused because it's not legal. So yeah, I've already been asked that.
They're fanatics about that, that's why.
Maybe because they're fanatics, and especially because actually when he was alive, the deceased always used to say, yeah, the day I die, bury me as Hitler. And they took it literally, so they wanted to respect that wish. Well, it's just that this wish wasn't written in a funeral contract, so that's that. And on top of that, it's not legal, so basically...
How does that work? Is a funeral contract arranged in advance with the person, or...
Funeral contracts. People often come to the funeral office to record their last wishes, so we plan all the arrangements together. It's about choosing the coffin, the type of ceremony, whether they want a secular or religious ceremony, if they want a funeral home, being present, whether they want to see the person or not, if they want specific makeup, a specific hairstyle, specific clothing, and we put everything in the contract. That means that on the day they pass away, they will have already paid for their own funeral, they will have chosen everything, and on top of that, we are obligated to respect their wishes. If, for example, you choose cremation and later don't get along with your children, they can't override your decision. That's why the funeral contract is crucial. It also prevents the family from having to organize the funeral and make decisions. And the financial burden.
What if you suddenly don't have time to make one?
In that case, it's the heirs who have to decide.
They need to agree on the...
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, and how does that happen? I mean, it's weird, but I would never even think of of making a contract like that. So how does it happen? Do people just have a realization and decide they're going to make a contract, or what's the...
There comes an age, usually around 60, when you attend more funerals, burying parents, friends, and others. Usually they really start preparing for their final resting place. And then I have young people who got interested in this because there are family conflicts, and they don't want, for example, that... I'll share the case of a young woman who made a funeral contract with me because her father, the only family she had left, raped her. Legally, her father has the authority and must decide at the funeral. And actually, she preferred to have her own choices written in the contract to make sure her father wouldn't interfere. That's also why sometimes we make contracts.
Have you handled any darker cases before?
Yeah, I've already buried, same story. The father of a girl who was raped by him throughout her childhood. And we found her father's body at home. He had passed away. The police called us. We had to intervene and remove the body. But the daughter didn't want to care for her father or handle the funeral arrangements. I get it, but someone had to handle it in this case, and it's, how should I put it? She is legally required to handle her father's funeral arrangements. Unless she presents evidence to a judge, it's a long process. That's why he stayed with us for so long.
What happens when it's like that? Just the body?
We left the body in a negative cell, so basically frozen somewhere, until all the decisions were made and someone could do something, right?
Does that happen often, cases like that, where you have...
No, it doesn't happen often, but it can happen. Yeah, it can happen.
Have you ever, I don't know, prepared a body that really left an impression on you, like, I don't know, physically shocking or hard to look at or things like that?
Well, I don't do the preparations. That's really the role of the embalmer. But on the other hand, I have had to go to places, like crime scenes, definitely places where we find the deceased. Well, he shot himself in the head or with a rifle, and yes, we had to pick up the pieces, after that. Scenes where we arrive, it's murder scenes where the person took 2 bullets to the head. Sometimes it happens where you arrive at scenes where the police call you saying, well, we have a case, we have a hanging, where you have to take down the person who took their own life.
Do you have a story like that? Or a time when you saw, or a story you heard about, or a body you saw, and I don't know, there was a murder or something?
Yes, more recently, I arrived at a home where someone had died, an older gentleman who I think was killed. Yes, that's it, we'll never know, but I think so, or maybe he needed help. Yes, I really think that's what happened. That's it, because given the position of the body, given what I saw, they tried to make me believe that the deceased had died that very morning. The color, smell, and conditions in the room made it obvious he had been dead for days. Those details are still striking. We often tell ourselves, oh, that's not possible, without realizing it. I'm always feminine, fairy nails, colorful clothes, makeup, but here I am in a place like this.
Was it because the guy looked like he'd been decomposing longer? And what were the elements in this case?
Yes, he was severely decomposed.
What was it? Do you think it was the person who notified the authorities?
No authorities were notified. A doctor confirmed the death and the person was already ill. But yeah, it's true that I noticed some things that make me think that everything wasn't very clear.
Have families ever asked you to change how a deceased person looks, like adjusting their hair or applying makeup?
Yes, it happened to me with a grandma, to dye her hair, because she really loved purple, but she had never dared to actually have purple hair. So I bought a temporary hair dye and I colored her hair, so that was really nice.
So you dyed the hair of someone who's already dead? That's wild.
How does that work? Well, actually, when we prepare the deceased, there's the embalmer and me. I'm a funeral advisor. But sometimes I do the nails, do makeup, or style the hair if, for example, the embalmer can't do it. So I'm there to do it too, and sometimes to help the families with my time as well, because sometimes it can be expensive, like for washing or preservation treatments. So I offer it to them. I tell them, if you want, I can do it. There's no problem, so it's legally allowed. I have the right to do it. But embalming treatments are very specific. I'm not allowed to do those. The deceased is placed on a stainless steel table in a lab with a sink and shower head available. After that, the process happens on its own.
Do you refuse requests like that, or like the suit you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, the suit. I refused that, but otherwise I didn't really refuse anything else. Actually, what else?
What is it? Are there requests that are kind of forbidden, that you're not allowed to accept?
Anything that glorifies evil, like Hitler. The crosses. things like that. It's kind of, it's part of the same thing. And forbidden things, not always what comes to mind or to me immediately.
Or things you're not allowed, for example, to put on a body. There are contraindications, I don't know.
Well, we also avoid weapons and things like that. Basically, what is illegal in life is also illegal in death. Drugs and all that, you have to avoid them. Well, you have to avoid them, it's forbidden.
All right. Have families ever asked you to remove someone's tattoo?
No, that's never happened to me. I've been asked for braids and similar little things.
But does it sometimes happen that you have, I don't know, bodies in coffins that are so damaged that you can't really show them to the family or things like that?
It depends on the situation, like in train accidents or the circumstances of the death. It's a bit complicated, but if we're transparent, families understand well. That's very important. But it's true that it happens sometimes, or we find ways to manage, for example. Once I had to accompany a man who had completely lost his head, and actually the family really insisted. Some people need to see, to believe, and wanted to meet the person. I explained this, so it will be complicated. Since he had hand tattoos, we showed his hands and hid the rest. That way, we wouldn't traumatize the families either, but they needed to have something visual to be sure it was really their loved one. So it happens, or sometimes the body is so decomposed that we can't show it to the families at all. We're not there to forbid them from anything, but we can strongly advise them not to go through with it, because sometimes it can be traumatic for life.
Do you have other examples like that, of decomposed bodies, or moments like, for example, the guy, he didn't have a head anymore, there was an accident, there was something like that?
In this case, it was a rifle. I made a rifle, there, it was a rifle, okay? Yeah, he used a rifle, to commit suicide, and that's it, there wasn't much left.
When you go under a train, so what happens? How does it go?
It really depends on how you land on the rails. I haven't tried it, so I can't tell you, but there are several possibilities. Sometimes it's just a limb that's torn off, sometimes it's the whole body that's in pieces.
How does it work when it's like that, when there are pieces everywhere? For example, in cases of natural disasters or cases of...
Actually, we have a body bag that's mandatory, and we collect the pieces, put them in the bag, and transport them. A forensic institute where autopsies are performed, even on body parts.
It's basically a bag for storing all the remains.
Exactly, a body bag.
Maybe a silly question that people might ask themselves, but have you ever been afraid that one day the corpse might not be dead? Or do you ever think it could still be alive?
Yeah, sometimes I think, if I'm walking around at night in the funeral home because I just did a transport and I'm bringing back a body, I think, oh my gosh. I hope I don't open the fridge and find someone alive. In France, that's very unlikely, though it has happened elsewhere. Yeah, that's my phobia, I can't. I think I'd put them back to sleep a second time, that's it. The doctor writes the death certificate, you stay dead. No, I'm kidding. But no, in France, it's so strictly regulated. Even when someone dies in a hospital, for example, they keep them under observation for 2 hours to make sure they're really dead, and so on. Every death is certified by a doctor, so there's very little room for deception in that.
Have you ever seen families who requested some kind of wild staging or even just particular setups? You know, even during ceremonies or anything, or things that are a bit strange, out of the ordinary?
Well, I wouldn't say strange, since every family is different and has its own personality. I've done ceremonies where the entire crowd forms a huge conga line around the coffin. I've had aperitifs with families by the coffin in the cemetery, for example.
Have fights ever broken out like that during a ceremony?
Yes, several times. I remember my first ceremony as master of ceremonies. So I was really stressed because on top of that, my former bosses had come to see how I was officiating, etc. I don't know what happened. Suddenly, as the lady was being buried, a woman began screaming. I can't recall exactly what she said, but it was something like, "Hey, aren't you waiting for me?" Anyway, and then I hear a guy say, "Oh no, not the alcoholic." And I thought, what's going to happen now? And then she walked up to the grave and started trying to slap that guy. He almost fell into the grave. I caught him just in time, and then after that, I don't know what happened. I found myself in the middle with hands flying everywhere, punches, slaps, and I was screaming. I don't know. This isn't the right time or place. It happens a lot, so don't think it doesn't, okay? The emotions, the resentments, the regrets too, and the anger. Grieving brings many emotions to the surface, and sometimes things unsaid for years emerge, along with sadness, anger, and more. It all comes out at once, and as a result, it leads to fights. Or, for example, even more recently, I had to deal with a fight in the cemetery because this young man had committed suicide. And what happened was that the family had forbidden his friends from coming. Why? Because when he committed suicide, he was surrounded by all these people. So the family needed someone to blame in this situation, and it ended up being the friends, so...
It's wild since the friends did nothing in this situation.
That's how it is. You can't judge the grief of a mother who just lost her son in such complicated circumstances, and she needs someone to blame. And unfortunately, it fell on the friends who were there that night, and it's true that she had asked for the funeral to be a private family affair, so the friends weren't supposed to come, but they came anyway. So actually, it was a pretty long story, because there was a police investigation, there was an autopsy, and it took more than 15 days to bury this young man.
What did the autopsy reveal in the end?
Oh well, that it was really concretely, but the family? During those 15 days, it's true that they focused on the idea of saying, yeah, it's because of the friends. So, with the sadness and how long the funeral took, plus visiting the body at the Institute of Legal Medicine from time to time. Actually, there was a build-up, there was an overflow of emotions, and then, on the day of the funeral, it all came out.
So, what happened then, on the day of the funeral?
A family member saw some young people in the distance, approached them, and asked who they were. They replied that they were friends. The mother turned, recognized them, and started screaming. I couldn't understand what was said since they were farther away in the cemetery. I actually expected it. I sensed it during the ceremony when I saw that group of young people arrive, knowing they weren't supposed to be there. I told myself to quickly get everyone out of the cemetery because I sensed a fight was coming, so I started evacuating people. That's also when the mother noticed those young people. Then the uncles, brothers, and sisters joined in, and it became chaos.
Revelations had happened before, for example, during a ceremony. I'm not sure. For example, someone cheated on his girlfriend and unexpectedly his mistresses show up.
Yeah, it happened to me once. Luckily only once, because it was the most embarrassing moment of my life. The mistress showed up at the funeral.
And so the others didn't know that.
Exactly, and the wife was there at that moment, so actually we were at the crematorium. The wife was sitting there crying, her husband, etc., who didn't know he had been unfaithful. That's it.
She didn't know at all?
She didn't know at all. And actually, the teacher comes in, sits at the back of the classroom, and then she starts laughing, chattering, and so on. Well, I was there, okay.
And did you know it was the teacher at that moment, or not at all?
No, not at all. I wondered why she was laughing. Later, I went to see her, because my role is also to make sure the ceremony goes well and that people respect this final tribute. So, it's true that gossip, laughter, and all that, sometimes it's a bit much, so I go to see her. I ask her to be quieter, out of respect for the deceased, for their family. She says, yeah, but I'm the mistress. But she said it so loudly that everyone turned, oh, oh, oh. And the wife who stood up, who goes to see her, who says, yeah, who are you? What are you doing here at my husband's funeral? Yes, but he was my lover. So, well, what I did was, I asked one of my boys, a pallbearer, to take the lady outside to ease the tension. The wife, shocked and angry, asked if we should stop the ceremony. She spat on her husband's coffin and left. That's the end. I was there thinking, well...
Oh, shit.
Okay, it's okay.
How does it work financially? Do people pay for their ceremony in advance, or does the family cover it?
Actually, it depends. Sometimes they pay in advance because they have a funeral contract, so they've already paid for their funeral.
How much is it if you pay in advance?
Actually, it just costs the price of a funeral, simply put, except that it's often paid monthly, like an insurance plan. That's it. You pay 30, 40, or 50 euros monthly, which creates capital for the funeral. Afterwards, we can also access the deceased's accounts, as we receive the bank details with the death certificate. We contact the banks, send our invoice, get the family's approval, and then withdraw from the account. Only tax authorities and funeral homes can withdraw up to 5,000 euros from a deceased person's account after death. It's just a possibility, or after that. Some families pay us directly, others use contactless credit cards. Let's relax. I doubt 4,000 euros will go through contactless. Some families simply send us checks. Or sometimes we offer payment plans, because there are families who sometimes find themselves in a tough spot and it's complicated. And we're not here as many people think, we're not here to make money all the time off the dead. We also have empathy. I often offer payment plans, giving families a year to pay for the funeral. They come each month and pay when they can.
It happens, and I'm not hiding anything, but there are ceremonies that can be more expensive than others, where people want to go all out. I don't know where things are different, but honestly, it's always more or less the same thing.
Yes, it happens. Some ceremonies can be expensive. I recall one that cost nearly 10,000 euros. Okay, yes, where there were many luxury cars. The gentleman was a race car driver. He liked big cars like Lamborghini, Ferrari, and so on, so it's true that there were a lot of luxury cars. We had made a very, very beautiful procession, by the way. It was magnificent, incredible. We were escorted by the police and so on. We were escorted there, a silver slope moving through the streets when the city was closed. To prevent the cars from being touched during the ceremony, police officers watched them. And a lot of flowers, but the family wanted to buy them. I think there were about 2,000 euros worth of flowers. Wild, yes. Some funerals are lavish, while others just have balloon releases. Things like that, well, I mean, a balloon release, it's not the most expensive thing, but sometimes it does increase the prices. There are ceremonies where they want caterers or things like that afterwards, so we handle all of that. Or musicians or singers, choirs, so the prices go up a lot.
Have you ever had families who wanted to dress the deceased in a special suit or with other care, strange clothes or not so strange?
There are families who want their loved ones to leave naked. Oh yeah, that's it, in the simplest way. Okay, that happens, just like there are deceased who leave in huge wedding dresses. Okay, it's very, very, very nice to put on, but actually very complicated. Then we have ceremonial uniforms for former soldiers, former police officers, and also cyclists. It was quite a hassle. Okay, the cyclist outfit, really tight, really form-fitting. It's also simple to put on. And once I buried someone, a Viking, that was really cool.
Funny, how does it work as a Viking? There's a Viking costume?
Yeah, a big furry costume. It was so cool. I was really happy. Because I like doing things that are a bit original like that. And when it happens, it's nice.
What's the most awkward situation you've experienced with a deceased person's family or even with people who come to visit?
Well, actually, there was a really awkward situation. It's the one where I got hit on by the fiancé of the deceased's granddaughter. That is, I was taking care of Grandpa's funeral, and the fiancé of the deceased's granddaughter came to see me during the ceremony. And he kind of hit on me, you know, he asked for my number and so on. And all that, and I found it very awkward. Very, very awkward. Because actually, well, I don't know. Actually, his future wife was there, yeah, crying over her grandfather's coffin, and he was hitting on me. Clearly. I mean, how awful, right in the middle of the cemetery. But who does that?
Does she know about it?
I'm the one who went to tell him. I stayed in my place, I stepped back, I told him it wasn't the right time, it wasn't the right place, and that he was being really disrespectful to the ceremony, and to all of that.
Have you ever had disagreements, like someone wanting to put something in the coffin while others object, or other awkward situations like that?
Yeah, actually I had a family, well, it wasn't about putting things in the coffin, but I had a family who argued because one of my pallbearers was a person of color.
Okay.
And actually...
Wait, what? And why is that? Like, he didn't want to...
He had a family member who simply refused to let his father be carried by a black pallbearer.
And, well, just because he was racist, there's no...
Exactly. But they actually fought. One was extremely racist, the other very tolerant. It was tough to manage, you know? I made it clear to the person who was refusing. I told them, here, you don't have a choice. Actually, it's my team. It's this way or not at all, you know? If you're not happy, you can go somewhere else. Clearly.
Pallbearers are the people who carry the coffin?
Yes, exactly.
And have you ever had any trouble with that? Like, I don't know, they might drop the coffin or something, I don't know.
No, I pray daily that it never happens to me. But I have colleagues who have already had problems with that, who have already slipped the coffin at the cemetery or made a scratch on the coffin, or they ripped their pants while lifting the coffin. I hope it never happens to me since it's an international embarrassment, but such things can occur.
What challenges do you face during such a ceremony, and what do you hope goes right or worry might go wrong?
I hope the hearse doesn't break down because we're in the middle of the procession and then the hearse breaks down. We end up with the coffin behind and the whole family behind, and we're like, what do we do now? That's my phobia. Like my vehicle breaking down during a ceremony or something like that. We could go to extremes, but what if there's a score to settle? I'm thinking of a family I once accompanied. Some time ago, someone was murdered, shot twice in the head, and on the day of the ceremony, even days before the ceremony, the family received threats since the suspected murderer hadn't been found.
They thought it was someone from the opposing family. What?
No, not necessarily. No. Actually, the police couldn't find who committed the murder, but he was still at large. The murderer, clearly, and the family was receiving threats from certain people. But we were there. Actually, what was going to happen, Isn't it possible that on the day of the funeral, there could be another settling of scores and we could get killed, So at that point, I asked the police to handle it. The security at the funeral, so that's the worst of the worst, we end up in a shootout. Or that my boys, me, or even the family could get shot. Yeah, damn, but then...
In the end,
It went well. We were really stressed before, a little bit during and after. We were still running on adrenaline, but after that, it went really well.
Did you listen to any speeches during the ceremony, or not really?
Yes, of course.
Have you ever heard something surprising or funny in those speeches, or noticed people trying to be humorous or not?
Yeah, there are a lot of people who try to be funny, and that's great. I find it so moving because when they speak, they really highlight who the deceased was, and I think it's beautiful to be able to go along with it all the way. Some speeches are funny, some sad, and some awkward.
Okay, yeah.
Like a grandson settling scores with his recently deceased grandfather. You were great to the others, but to me, you were a terrible grandfather.
Has that ever happened before?
Yeah, that's already happened. Yeah, things like that happen sometimes. People, they need to speak up sometimes to settle scores. And it frees them from a burden. Maybe it also allows them to move forward potentially with their grieving as well.
How did the family react when he said that?
They were embarrassed. They were very embarrassed. They wondered why. Me? The first time at my father's funeral, I have an uncle who's always a bit crazy and we always wonder what's going to happen. And then suddenly he stood up at my father's funeral. We thought, what's he going to do? But no, he did something really cool. But sometimes there are things like that. You just can't stop him. It's improvisation and that's okay.
Have you seen or heard any other funny speeches?
Things I've heard, not necessarily during the funeral, but before. I had accompanied a family. They were so funny. And actually, they posted a message on Facebook. So they took the deceased's Facebook account and the son wrote a message on his profile saying, "Hi, you all need to know, I'm dead. You are all invited to my funeral on this date and time at the crematorium. Please don't cry, but instead have a drink to my health, sending you kisses. We'll see each other on the other side." Things like that. Wow, it's surreal. Honestly, it's better than a death notice obituary. It's funny and really great, actually. The deceased was always like that, so it makes sense to me.
And people took it well when he did it like that?
But of course. Because if people knew the deceased, they know that it was clearly him. He definitely could have done that.
I'm stepping a bit out of this topic, but have you ever had some pretty disgusting things like insects in the bodies or things that weren't cleaned up properly?
Yes, it happens. Oh, yes, it happens. Insects, yes, like maggots, for example. If we have a body that's been decomposing for a while, of course maggots show up, so yes, it happens. Yeah, damn, it's something else. It's complicated, but it's always the same. Our job is to support the person with dignity, all the way to the end, So, of course, it's not easy. We don't always see simple things. Sometimes we witness extreme brutality that seems unreal, like something from a movie, but it's real.
What's your routine for preparing a ceremony like this? What steps do you take?
There are many unnoticed steps, starting with welcoming the family and preparing everything, like choosing the funeral and coffin and deciding what to do or not. We really establish the timeline of the ceremony, the date, the time, and so on. We organize all the teams, then we take care of transporting the bodies, so we go pick up the bodies from the place of death. We handle everything from start to finish, including all administrative tasks at town halls, so everything falls into place. Once we have the body, we proceed with dressing, preservation care, presenting the body, and then the ceremony. Then it all depends on what they want for the ceremony. But there are ceremonies that require more work than others, so we work on those. It takes us about 5 days to put together something quite nice.
There have already been deceased who had no one. For example, no one came to the ceremony. Oh yeah?
That's sad, but it's because the person had no family. Still, we're not here to judge, just to remain tolerant and neutral. That means there are sometimes people who have had very complicated lives, who've fallen out with everyone, or who were, I don't know, maybe alcoholics. I don't know. I don't know the exact story of every family and every deceased person.
Is there still a ceremony in that case, or is it just, yeah?
Well, yes, of course. It's my job to support everyone with dignity. And so, yes, it happens to me. The ceremonies aren't as long as usual, but yes, I do sometimes find myself alone at funerals with the deceased and my team of pallbearers. And if we have petals left over from a previous ceremony, or even dried petals that I always have on hand, we make a gesture of tribute. We place a few petals, things like that, and I always do that. Actually, it's really important to me to at least read a poem or a text. Even if no one hears it, it doesn't matter. It's my job to accompany this person until the end, so for me it makes sense that there is something. A final goodbye.
Has that happened before?
It happens more often than you think. Many destitute, homeless, or familyless people experience this frequently.
Sometimes ceremonies can be overcrowded.
Sometimes it shifts from everything to nothing. The day before, we were alone at the ceremony, and the next day, we found ourselves with 800 people. Oh yes, usually when it's about mourning young people, there are a lot of people. Or sometimes for mourning people who were a little bit known in the city, who were involved in associations, in politics, etc. You find quite a lot of people.
Have you ever been moved by a ceremony?
Yes, let's say the ceremonies that affect me the most, even though they all touch me, are the ones for children. How can I put it? It's just illogical what we're experiencing at that moment, and it's terrible. Because people often tell me that I have a lot of courage to do this job, but I can assure you today I don't have the courage of those parents, and I don't think I ever will. It's crazy.
Do you have an example like that?
I'll take the example of the first little girl I accompanied. I'll even mention her first name because I know her parents always give me that permission. Her name was Leah. She was 2.5 years old. She passed away from a tumor in her stomach, and she was the first little girl I accompanied through grief, the first parents I supported in my career. So for me, it has a special meaning. Let's just say it was extremely difficult. Because when it's the first time you find yourself facing a child who has passed away, you ask yourself, why? Why? Actually, there's this mix of emotions where you tell yourself, yes, we have to do our job. Okay, we do it, but I also feel like this isn't normal. Why? Why are we doing this, you know? And then there's the side that brings us back to reality a little, that makes us say, oh, wow, and we complain about the price of gas going up, the price of pasta going up. And her parents, they're burying their daughter. But what are you complaining about, really?
Do you have other examples that made you reflect on life? You see?
Yes, like road accidents. Anyway, when death isn't expected, like sometimes with cancer, we know that unfortunately the illness will be incurable. Even if we never really get used to the idea, we start to prepare ourselves for grief, but sometimes grief just happens suddenly when we don't expect it, you know? Or 5 minutes before we see the person. And I don't know, an hour later we get a call from the police saying he passed away. What?
In general, this might be a silly question, but statistically speaking, are these usually normal deaths? Do you accompany elderly people or people who die of old age, or on the contrary, is it more about accidents, things that happen unexpectedly? What's the statistic for the people?
So, on a national scale, it's mostly old age, and then there are all the accidents and so on. For my company, it's cancer cases.
Okay.
I bury both elderly and many young people.
And in terms of, I don't know, if we look at the statistics, what is it? Is it about 20% young people, 30% roughly?
I would say it's more like 60% young people, you know?
60% young people?
Yes, it's impressive, younger and younger people. When I say young, for me, 50 years old is young. Yes, that's it, but let's say around 50, 60 years old. A lot. People in their 30s, 40s too, and then even younger. Road accidents, people in their 20s. Yes, unfortunately, suicides as well. It occurs in their 20s and also in young children and babies.
What is it? What are the main causes of death you see? For me,
it's mostly cancer and Alzheimer's, including early onset cases. Some die from Alzheimer's at 60. But it's true that cancer is still a disaster.
Okay, these cancers, what kind? In general?
It's very random. It could be lung, liver, pancreatic, or widespread cancers, sometimes appearing just a month before or after. It's over, you know.
Don't you get paranoid? I don't know. After a while, seeing so many causes of death like that, I know that when I see someone die from something, I'm afraid it will happen to me too, so I get super careful.
It's true that when you accompany a lot of people who die like that, from illnesses that come on suddenly later in life and are surprising, Let's say it's true that we tend to overthink a little. Sometimes when I have a little pain in my groin, I'm like, oh, I hope it's not breast cancer. Yeah, it's true, it's crazy, but we end up overthinking afterwards. It's terrible. We see so many things sometimes that we just think, wow, it's intense. Life really hangs by a thread.
Do you remember the first time, I don't know where, you were faced with a dead person, for example, a death? How was it?
In terms of work,
How did you feel at that time in your life?
in my life, the first time I was confronted with death, I was 11 years old, and I asked to go see the person who had passed away. It was my aunt, and it really mattered to me. Usually young people don't go, but maybe I already had a connection with death. And I remember putting a rose under her hands, touching her and handling her. At 11 years old, it never really disturbed me that much. Then there was my father too, same thing. My father was resting at home and I slept in the room next door for 5 days. And it was okay, you know. But because it was my father, I don't think I would have slept next to a deceased person otherwise. I don't really know myself, of course, but since it was my father, yeah. After handling a deceased person for the first time, I can still feel the sensation on him. Actually, the sensation of coldness, of stiffness, it's very unique, and I did it because I told myself, yeah, what you're doing is extremely important.
What was it, the first deceased person?
It was a little old lady, very elderly and very thin, very slim, so I really remember feeling her bones too.
Did she die from old age?
Of old age, yeah, that's it.
There was a smell. There's a smell when things like that happen. Or on the contrary, there's none at all.
So, yes, death has a smell. Okay, of course, death has a smell. Not always. There are deceased people who don't smell at all. It all depends on the cause of death too. It all depends on the date of death. Well, if the deceased is in an advanced stage of decomposition, obviously there are smells, but then there are also illnesses that can cause that too. Necrosis and bed sores can cause a noticeable odor, yes.
Is there a color too, or not necessarily?
Yes, bodies change color. It also depends on the circumstances of death. If it's a cardiac arrest, the body will be more red-blue, and if there's advanced decomposition, well, the body will start to turn gray, then greener. And after that, it will necrose. What?
It's weird, dressing in gold, like for example, you mentioned earlier doing the nails, for example,
No, it doesn't feel weird to me, because I see it as my job to support them and help them keep their dignity. If I don't do it, no one will. My role is to dress them and make them look beautiful for this final tribute and their family. This is extremely important. And when you think like that, you don't say to yourself, oh, it's weird and all that. No, I do it because I have to, because it's my job, and because this person deserves to be cared for.
What if tomorrow it's someone with no money at all? There still needs to be a ceremony. How does that work? Is there still a ceremony if he has no money?
He really has nothing. For example, indigent people, homeless people who have no income and who don't have a place to live. City halls and the locations of the death handle it. The obstacles are fine.
So the body is still taken care of in a manner of speaking.
It's going to be the bare minimum. Yes, it's always the same. It depends on the funeral home. Some do a little more. Otherwise, nothing changes. They leave as they arrived. With nothing. Very simple, no ceremony. But if they go through me, it's different. To me, it's still a person. Someone who lived, had a journey, stories, a life, and deserves dignity. So I always manage somehow. I know my accountant, she's going to scold me. She's already scolded me several times. But I always manage to find outfits, even if it means going to Emmaus to get a clean outfit so they can leave with dignity. Of course, we'll use the simplest coffin, the simplest cap. It will be a simple ceremony with no guests. We'll keep the budget low, but I still want it to be dignified.
Maybe it's a bit of a morbid question, but what are some of the worst bodies you've seen or heard about in this job? Or things that really stuck with you, where you thought to yourself,
that was my first case and the one that impacted me most. 2 cases in particular left a strong impression on me. As I mentioned earlier, the first was a man who shot himself in the head. I remember the forensic police were at the scene because since there was a firearm, they automatically had to collect as many fingerprints and evidence as possible. I don't recall exactly how to say evidence. And there were the police, the firefighters, there were a lot of people, and the officer said to me, "It's the first time." I said yes, I hadn't seen it yet, and then he took out his phone and started filming. I said, but what are you doing? He said, oh no, nothing, I'm capturing images for evidence, etc. And I got closer, and then I discovered the body. Outwardly nothing happened, but internally much was happening. But the police officer looked at me and said, that's pointless. And then he put away his phone. I said, were you actually filming me? He wanted to see if I was going to throw up or faint. He wanted to film because sometimes it's just so unusual. That body really shocked me since I love everything about criminal minds, police investigations and murders. And there I was on a crime scene, and it was real, not fictional. And seeing that, I thought to myself, this is real. And then I remember. It was an observation internship, so I wanted to see if I truly wanted this job daily. It was very revealing.
What did you see at that moment? Did you still see the weapon on the ground? Yes.
So, the weapon. It was the forensic police who... I mainly saw a guy from the forensic police walk past me with the weapon. You really feel like you're in a movie. You're there, wow, it's impressive. I've always loved that kind of series and so on. And then you arrive at the scene, you have the firefighters, the gendarmes, the forensic police, the female gendarme, and you're there, wow, it's crazy. And then you have this body that was sitting, that was positioned sitting, it was sitting, yes, it didn't have a head anymore. And you're there, wow, it's real. Many people judge our work and profession, but they don't understand what we experience and do. Especially because, no, the job of a funeral firefighter doesn't stop at cashing checks for funerals. You have to live, you have to do what we do every day.
Me? Sometimes I've seen on the internet mentions of, I don't know, mass graves. Does that really exist? Or if there are people who don't have money, are there really people who are put like that in mass graves or not? So, subtitling MFP.
They're not mass graves are ossuaries. That's what we use. When the burial plots have passed a certain period, for example, when families no longer visit the plots or when they reach their expiration date and so on, we gather the bones and place them in ossuaries. They're more like common grounds, let's say, where people are buried directly in the ground, which is provided by the city hall, but they're not all buried in the same grave. Each person still has their own season and culture.
Okay, that works, yeah, but so it's never right away, directly in that.
No, it's in a simple earth grave with a traditional burial.
That works. Sabrina, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Is there maybe one last thing you wanted to say to the people who are watching me? Or, I don't know?
Enjoy life. Enjoy life. As I often say in my ceremonies, we only have one. We have to live it to the fullest, without worrying about what others think, without worrying about what people might say or think about us. We just need to enjoy life and look after others and ourselves.
Of course. Thank you so much. Thank you, Lou.
Thank you.
Noah, this is already the end of this video. Let me remind you, of course, that if you also want to take part in an episode of StoryCube, you have an email. It's right here. Don't hesitate to send a little summary. And for everyone else, I'll put 2 other episodes that are now appearing on the screen. Click your screen to stay with us. This was Noah. Bye.